Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Saga Saturday. Hopefully we're live. My system did an update overnight and everything is in a different spot now. So if we drop out, it's really operator error here. I am Ula Brennan's daughter, self-professed Norse nerd, here with my Norse nerd friend. Unfortunately, Baron Bearsey cannot join us today. He's doing some crazy school work schedule stuff and needs some sleep, so we let him sleep in today. Kinahel, will you introduce yourself while I send this link out to the world?
Yeah, so I am Dan Kinahel, the library. I am really excited about today's topic. I got into quite a bit of a deep dive that did end up going down some weird rabbit holes. So some of my notes are going to be a little like I learned some new vocabulary this week. It was very exciting. And it was a really great sort of lead in generally for me to the Yuletide season. I love dead languages. I love Old English and Old Norse and Gothic and all these things. And so I think we've got a lot to talk about today. I'm excited.
There's a lot going on here. And yeah, just like absolutely a lot. So we are going to focus today on Yule in the Norse lands pre-Christian conversion. Unfortunately, it's hard to find like delineations between pre-Christian, post-Christian. Everything was written post-Christianity, so sometimes it's added back in. Oh, you're going to correct me there, aren't you?
Well, so I did find one reference. So there was one reference to a pre-Christian Yule that was written down pre-Christianity. And it's in Haraldskvaði, which is 10th century, so it's right at the time of the conversion.
Right at, yeah.
So like they're getting ready for Christianity, but they haven't quite gotten there yet.
It's on its way.
It's on its way. And what was kind of neat is it's from this one poem. It's talking about King Harald, and I wish Bearsey was here because he could read it in Old Norse too without sounding like a drunken Englishman reading Old Norse. But what it says is the courageous leader wants to toast the Yuletide out at sea. If he alone has his way and practice the sport of Freyr, which is battle. So it's in this one reference. The most important thing is he wants to toast Yule.
Right.
You know, he wants to go and live his best life, be a Viking on the sea, go fight battles and drink. And so as we'll get into this, like drinking really is like the hallmark of the holiday.
It really is. I mean, then as now. It's
yeah, that's fair. That's fair.
Well, let's start with, because you are a giant language nerd, specifically language, whereas I'm just a general nerd. You want to give us a little bit of the etymology, the history of the word and Yule itself?
Yeah, so we do spend a lot of time wondering in the historical linguistics community about where words come from, and Yule has proved a little bit tricky. We're pretty sure it comes from a Proto-Germanic word, Jökla, is sort of that's a very rough attempt at a pronunciation because it's unattested. We really don't know what it sounds like, but what's important to remember is there's a bunch of folk etymologies out in the world, and a folk etymology is sort of interestingly, a folk etymology is a very medieval thing. If you know about Saint Ivo, Saint Ivo wrote this whole he was a Breton saint. And there's a whole joke about him being a Breton and a lawyer and an honest man, and how you can't usually find all three of those together. Which is
I'm not going to go into that, but all right, I don't know that I'm disagreeing with you.
Anyway, so he wrote a bunch of these etymologies, and I don't think he wrote one for Yule, but it's an old thing. Humans do it, right? We hear a word, we make a connection. But what's important to remember is that it does not come from a name for Odin. We'll talk about Odin's names and his associations with the holiday later, but it doesn't come from Odin's name. It doesn't come from a type of cod. That's one I've seen. It doesn't come from the word for ale. It does not come from the Latin joculus, which means like a party, though the Proto-Germanic word we think probably means like festivities, or it could just mean the name of the holiday, like the Yule. Right, like the word for Yule could just come from Yule, right? Or it doesn't come from the name Julius Caesar. And I honestly don't know how like Ioculus and Julius Caesar got mixed in. And I don't know where the cod thing came from.
So I'm thrown off by the cod, Julius Caesar, and the I can't even say it. Yeah.
But these are all like folk etymologies. Somebody will post it on Facebook, and they'll be like, Yule comes from da, and you're like, no, it doesn't. It comes from a Germanic word. We're a little unclear on where that word comes from, but it's
not that. Yeah. Yep.
So. Oh, go ahead.
Oh no, I was just gonna say, yeah, you read that bit about the courageous leader wants to toast the Yuletide at sea. I personally think that's a bad plan, because going out to sea in the middle to end of December seems like a bad plan to me. But when your in-laws are in town, I don't know, maybe I'd go to sea.
And
I love my in-laws, but
top safety tip: also don't get drunk on the water.
Shush you! Don't judge.
Who hasn't? But also wear your PFD and don't get drunk on a boat. Totally
fair. Absolutely fair. So what is Yule? We think of Yule as being, like, I've heard references of it being a day, a week, a month of festivities. But how much of that can we, like, some of the stuff that I've found is it's definitely a period. From what I've found in medieval Yule and pre-medieval Yule, it's a period of a week, 10 days. It's hard to tell.
The best article that I found on this, it's a book, and it's called Yule, and then it's got a subtitle. And the problem is it's all in Swedish. And so I spent a certain amount of this week learning to read Swedish, kind of, to try and read this book. Like, okay, I can mostly read Danish, and I've got some Old Norse, and so like mushing those two together plus Google Translate to like get through this book, it did not go as well as I would like to say it did, but so what I found, and the book is Yule Disting och Fork.
Yeah, something Swedish.
I'll put it in the comments later.
Perfect.
But it's by this guy Andreas Nordberg, and he talks. The whole focus of this book is like the calendar and the dating of Yule. Right. So the first thing to keep in mind is that Yule was the name of a month, or 2 months is kind of in. So Bede talks about two months named Yule, which is the Old English version. Yule, excuse me. He talks about it in De Temporum Ratione, which was written about 726 CE. Right. So this is very solidly early medieval. And they come together on the calendar. So they bracket the winter solstice. So you have Yule, winter solstice, Yule.
Interesting.
Right. It's weird. Like, you think about today, you're like, well, my birthday is the 25th of November. But if you've got two months of the same name, like,
right. Well, yeah.
And so the Gothic calendar, the earliest lexical reference we have to Yule is actually a Gothic calendar from 350, which has Frama Julius, which is before Yule. And then from that, we can sort of guess that the next month is Yule, which is Yule. So for them, they had 2 months that were focused on Yule, but the first one was before Yule and the second one was Yule. By the time 726 rolls around, you've got the pre-Christian calendar that Bede is talking about, and he's saying they just called it Yule and Yule. So was he confused, or had they just sort of stopped calling the first one before Yule? We don't know.
Right.
There is this evidence for these double Yule months.
Okay, so my question on that, because I have never heard of that until I was reading your notes, so thank you. Do you think that they are full months, 30-ish day periods, or is it's not 2 week periods with midwinter in the middle? Do you know what I'm saying?
Right. So it looks like they are full lunar months. So we're operating generally on a lunar calendar.
Yeah.
So the problem is a lot of what the stuff I was finding about the calendar was in this Swedish book, which again, not a language I actually can read or speak. So,
there's only so much Google Translate can do for us.
there's only so much. But they are operating on this lunar calendar that's sort of bounded. It's not a full lunar solar calendar, but it's sort of a modified lunar calendar, and the count is all based off the winter solstice. So the winter solstice is the reset mark, and then you reset and start counting from there. So yeah, we've got the two full months, and I'm looking at the notes really quick and trying to make sure that this thing that I'm about to read actually makes sense. So this is coming from this is talking about when does that actual celebration itself, right? Like, so you've got these 2 months, they're both Yule, but how do we know when the actual holiday starts? And based on this book, it sounds like it's the first new moon after the winter solstice. So that is the date of Yule. So this year, if you want to celebrate Yule in the Old Norse method, the first new moon after the winter solstice rises at about 8 p.m. on January 12th.
That's some wishful thinking. I believe you're on midsummer, not.
Yeah. No, it's 2020, so of course the moon's not going to rise for 6 months. That makes sense.
That's totally fair.
No, so January 12th, 2021 will be the first new moon after the winter solstice. The winter solstice, of course, takes place on December 21st, 22nd. Yeah. And what's interesting to me, really quickly, the first new moon after the winter solstice, that's going to be the longest, darkest night of the year.
Mm-hmm.
So unless, of course, the new moon lands on winter solstice, which I assume it does on occasion.
Yeah, I would think so.
Like mathematically, it's got to eventually end up there.
Yeah, but that's not a common enough thing that it would be. It's not like it happens every year, every other year, or whatever, right?
Yeah. But so the winter solstice, that's going to be the longest. The sun will have been out of the sky for the longest period, and then without the light of the moon,
right,
just got an incredibly dark, long night.
So dark.
And so it's, this is, if that's the date when the festivities begin, you're presumably building from that, and the length of the party is kind of a good question. Right. I found Hakon Saga talks about a 3-day party. There's an author, Rodriguez, who wrote his PhD thesis on Old Norse drinking customs. He talks about it as 13 days or 2 weeks.
Yeah, I was finding the same. There's references. There's varying lengths of time, and
yeah.
I wonder if part of that is stature and how much resources you have. Like, right, if you are a poor farm worker as opposed to a farm, a homesteader, a farmsteader, you're not going to have the same resources to take 2 weeks off of work and eat and drink the whole time. Right. But you might be able to take a couple of days, right? Well, you have the resources to do that.
And maybe it's like the 12 nights of Christmas, where you don't necessarily go all out for
right,
all 12
on all
nights.
Of them, right?
Right, but there's maybe like the 3 days when they talk about that 3 days in Hakon Saga. Maybe that's just the high celebration. Like, those are the most right, important 3 days.
The most, yeah.
Get the drunkest. You do all the crazy, right, and just those 3 nights. But then, so there's a. Let me read this quote, yep, from Nordberg, which kind of talks about the dating thing and then a little bit more. So he talks about the time of the Old Norse Yule midwinter nights. He puts that about the 19th to the 21st of January, according to Snorri Sturluson, and that's based on the lunar solar calendar. You know what? I'm not going to read this quote because it's not making sense as I'm looking at it. And I think the reason it's not making sense is because, again, I don't actually speak Swedish.
Right.
So
right,
my translation efforts here have been
little off. That's all right.
Yeah. So my apologies to the audience.
Sure.
We got a question. Christiana Lynn. So the winter solstice is the shortest day, followed by the new moon is the longest night. So
sort of.
Sort of. The night of the winter solstice is the longest night. So as you move away from the winter solstice, so here the 12th of January, that's it's enough away that you're starting to see light gain.
Yep.
But because the moon isn't shining at night,
yeah,
you've got sort of the darkest.
The nights. Yes, so the longest night is winter solstice. The nights, just prior to, just after, are quite dark because of the phase of the moon, right? The waxing of the moon. And then the moon becomes bright, so the nighttime becomes brighter on the 12th this year.
Yeah.
That's.
I hope that answers your question.
Right. Yeah. If that's too confusing, just go back in the comments and we'll try to sort it out again.
I'm just really excited about this. And the problem is I get really excited about something and I lose a little bit of my coherence.
Right.
Coherency? Anyway, whatever.
It's all good. It's all good. All right. So, yeah, again, we just kind of touched on this, the length of the celebration. Who knows? Could be anything. What's this comment about Bettina Sommer, bringing in the 12 days?
Well, so Bettina Sommer, she wrote an article called Pre-Christian Yule, and which was a huge resource in putting this together.
Yeah.
And she talks about 12 days was the length of the celebration. So that was her estimate, which is, so we've got things running all there. And then we've got this we'll talk about sort of the purpose of the holiday and sort of traditions on the holiday and what they were doing. But there is a reference to a large bloat. Bloat sounds terrible. I'm going to call it blot.
All right,
bloat,
fair enough.
Anyway, so there's a reference to a large one of those held at Lesra, which is in Denmark. Thietmar of Marsberg talks about it, and he says that went on. It's a sacrifice ceremony, and that went on for 9 days. So
9, not 90, right?
9.
Yeah. Okay. I'm like 90. I heard 90 at first. That is a long time.
Yeah, no, but so he says 9 days for this blot ceremony, which takes place in January. So that does, if we're calculating it using the first new moon, that works for Yule.
It does.
And it would make sense that was a major sacrifice and festival kind of moment, because it's one of the few that are mentioned explicitly as holidays,
right,
in the early sources. But again, 9 days instead of the 12 or the 2 weeks or
the 3 days or the your comment. So the holidays, the kind of the high holy days that I have found are really Yule and Easter for post or during and post Christianity. And Christianity kind of seemed to come in like a sledgehammer. In like 1 year, the king said, "Y'all are Christian now," and boom, everybody's Christian. So it just kind of like sat on everything. But the holy days that I have found most reference to are Yule, and it's still called Yule after conversion, but it's Yule and Easter, and that also makes sense in my thought, because it ties into solstice, it ties into spring, and babies and sex, and that's a whole other thing on Easter. But we'll get to Easter in a couple months, everybody.
So that was actually the holidays really quickly. That was one of the things that I found that was interesting, was there was a couple of references, and I'm flipping through my notes trying to find it now, about when you were supposed to make sacrifice. And so Olaf Saga Helga talks about 3 annual blots, one at winter nights, which is at the beginning of winter, one at midwinter, and one in summer. So you've got going into winter, deepest winter, and then Easter. And then Inlinga Saga, which I guess, that's spring. So midsummer. So you've got midsummer, midwinter, and early winter. And then Inlinga Saga talks about, then they should sacrifice towards winter for abundance. In the middle of winter for sacrifice, you sacrifice for growth. And then in the summer, it was a victory sacrifice. So those are the 3 major holidays that these 2 sagas reference.
So what are we thinking? What are your thoughts on the purpose of Yule? because I have some thoughts, and I don't know that my thoughts actually align with the documentation that we have. I have thoughts based on my assumptions. So what do you got for me?
So my assumption was that it was a solar thing, right? Like I live
As
in
well.
Alaska, right? Like we get a little nutty for solstice because it's been a long, dark winter.
Yep.
We're all stuck together. The
Yep.
sun has been slowly disappearing, and then it
comes
back.
back.
You're never entirely sure it's going to, but it does, and you're just like, thank Christ.
Exactly.
So it's a very exciting moment. But as it turns out, in the research that I've done, the sun coming back wasn't necessarily the biggest deal. And I think what I keep forgetting is that much of inhabited Scandinavia at this point is actually south of Anchorage.
Right.
So Oslo, Iceland is a different deal, right? Iceland is sitting at like 60, I think 64 degrees north. So that's north of Anchorage, right? Parts of Iceland are roughly on par with Fairbanks. Okay, cool, like respect. But like Oslo's at 59 degrees north, and that's 2 degrees south of Anchorage. Yeah. And that's the most northern of the three
major settlements. Yeah.
Like Germanic Scandinavian, right? Like Finland's its own party.
Finland's, yeah, yes it is.
But of Sweden, Norway, and Denmark, those three, Oslo's the farthest north capital, and it's only at 59 degrees north. Like there's Tromsø, and there's references to the farther north in Norway having kind of its own flavor of celebration for Yule, and that flavor being a more sun-focused
solar. Yeah, I agree. I was really surprised when because I was looking for solar references and the return of the sun, and oh my God, we're actually going to make it through through the dark times of the winter. And I was, maybe that's my modern view of it, but I was not finding anything in the writings that supported it being a solar, a sun thing. And it seems
we all forget that it's not actually that far north.
Yeah.
Like we think about the land of the ice, right? Like you go back and listen to the Immigrant Song and it sounds like they're coming from, the Arctic Circle, and they're not.
And they're not. They're way far away from the Arctic Circle. Like they actually get sunlight at some point all year round.
Right.
It may only be 4 or 5 hours in the winter, but it's not like total darkness as it is further north. And I totally agree. And we forget about that. And also think about the weather is not as cold and dark, and like there's just thoughts in my head because it's a place I've never been to about what this is like. And I think we make some assumptions that are erroneous.
So one thing I did find about the sun feast, that I want to read to you because I just thought it was so wild. So Prokipios is a Byzantine sort of historian. He wrote The Secret History of the Byzantine Empire, which to people who are it's wild. It's wild. It's something I recommend reading it, but if you are a Byzantine monarchist, it makes people mad. Oh, I respect that. So anyway, he's a 6th century guy, so he's dead, so whatever. But 6th century, and he's writing about the people of Thule, which is this island that exists far to the north. Yep. And he talks about they have a feast. So here's a quote. So when 35 days of this long night, and the long night is 40 days of night. So I guess if you've seen 40 Days of Night, the movie, here we go. Or was that 28 Days of Night?
28 days, and now we're talking about zombies, and we're back to October and The Walking Dead.
So anyway, so in his story, when 35 days of this long night had passed, the custom with them is that the people gather up on a mountaintop, and as soon as any of them see traces of the sun being about to return, he announces it to those who are waiting in the valley that in 5 days the sun will shine again. Although it's still dark, they celebrate this message with a party. This is the Thulites' biggest party. And let me tell you what, like the sun doesn't not shine here in Anchorage. Like it shines all year round. It's just, it's dark at 5 o'clock in the afternoon, 4 o'clock in the afternoon. It gets to be a downer. Let me tell you, like you go to work in the dark, you come home in the dark.
Yeah. My first trip to Anchorage was, I flew up there December 26th and home January 10th or something. Yeah. Oh yeah. It's
a
beautiful.
downer. So
But
let me tell you, like hiking up a mountain and being like, I see the sun, I see
right,
signs it's coming back. I would go back down to the valley, which I don't live in a valley. I live on a peninsular plain thing. Anyway, but whatever, come down. And
oh,
it is our biggest party of the year.
huge.
Like solstice is a big, well, okay, our second biggest party. Our biggest party is for rendezvous when
Oh,
it's March and we've all gotten sick of each other.
yeah.
All
Rondi up there is, I hope to get up there someday for Rondi. Rondi and Iditarod, those are the two things I want to get up there for. Again,
So anyway, so this
teeny.
is this Procopius thing. So that's one theory. Nordberg and Sundquist suggest that it's really, and I think their theory is the best. So they say, look, it's probably a fertility festival a little bit. They probably also celebrate the return of the sun. And then we get into kind of some dead family member things. And that's something I think we'll talk about more when we talk about Yule after Christianity.
Right.
But there's this whole theory that was Yule a celebration for the cult of the dead? And was this all about like kind of a Dia de los Muertos situation?
Right, where the veil is thinner.
Of like dead ancestors. But
yeah,
there's kind of limited evidence for this. And Benita, whose last name I just, Sommer, she makes a pretty convincing argument that in fact it's not a cult of the dead thing, that maybe the dead were involved a little bit because sort of surviving traditions suggest at least some supernatural element.
Right.
But it's
I
not.
I have to say I would have to kind of agree with her. I've seen some, I mean, I'm obviously not as extensively read in a lot of these things, but if anything, I think it's less of an occult sort of thing and more of a, I mean, we have family traditions now that, there's things that I do during the winter holidays that I learned from my grandparents, that they learned from their grandparents, right? So there's that connection to the past in that way. But there's also, sorry, am I gonna sneeze? I can't tell. All right. There is, I think it's more like the veil is thinner between the worlds. Or the thought of that. And the other thing is there's actually a surprising amount of animal birthing that happens in the winter.
Okay.
So animals with long gestation, cattle, pigs, they've got 9-month gestations. So if they're getting impregnated in the spring, babies come around December, January. So that's a cause for celebration, right? That's the in addition to the sun is coming back, we can, go hunting and harvest grains and stuff like that. Babies are being born. So
that's a good tie-in to one of the other things I found, which was talking about in Hakon Saga Gotha. They talk about you drink toasts till Ors og Frithir, so to the good harvest for the coming year, or abundance and peace. So at Yule you toast to abundance, you toast to peace, and if you've got animals being born, that kind of thing, that really kind of ties in with that.
Right.
And then in toasting, you're speaking your hopes for the year to come.
Right.
But one of the things that Sommer really got into was that Yule was a time of prophecy, and more than just prophecy, was a time to speak things into being. So the technical term for this is a liminal period, right? Where there's sort of additional powers of creation sort of existing.
Right.
And so in Olaf's saga Tryggvasonar, they talk about Valdemar, King Valdemar is ruling Gardariki, and his mother is a spakona. She's a prophet woman. And she comes out and they bring her chair. You've got that chair of the prophetess that we talked about a couple episodes ago.
Mm-hmm.
So that's brought out before the high seat of the king, and the king speaks to her, and before any of the drinking starts, the king asks, what do you see for the year to come? And do you see any harm or danger which threatens us? And it's at Yule when she has this special power to really see into the future. Right. And one of the things that Sommer really focused on was that all of this excessive drinking, all of this excessive eating that we're going to talk about, was to create the abundance for the coming year. So you exist in abundance at this liminal point, and you sort of trick the year to come into believing that well, we're abundant now, so of course in the future we'll be abundant.
Right.
You want to create the world that you're going to see. It's very, like, it feels very New Age, the gift, right? Like I speak it into being, right? But that's kind of what they're doing, right? They're saying, you know, I see abundance around me, therefore I will continue to see abundance around me, because in this special time of year, when we all have the power to create this, you know, we see it into the future. So that was Sommer's theory, was that's what was special about Yuletide. And then there's, you know, we talked about earlier, winter solstice being sort of the reset point for the weekly count, right? So Yule is sort of celebrating the new year, right? Like it's straight up, in certain ways, straight up a Yule, it's a New Year celebration.
Right.
And that's as important as any of this, to just sort of celebrate, hey, we survived another year, let's do this again, woohoo, right? And then last, there was a very early article that I read. So obviously people watching this would not be privy, but we have a chat, right, where we talk during the week. And I mentioned this article that I was reading, and Bear C was just like, because it was from like 1950, and it's talking about sacral kingship. And so I did want to note briefly, there were a lot of theories early on about the sort of power of sacral kingship. And if anybody out there has read The Golden Bough, right, that's Fraser's big thing, is the king, the king representing the dying and reborn God. And it's totally worth the read. Like I went through a period in junior high when I got my Star Wars books taken away, and I proceeded to plow my reading brain through everything. And one of the things on my mom's bookshelf was The Golden Bough. So I promptly read that cover to cover, and had this little moment of like, you can kill the king and it creates abundance in the world. And I'm not suggesting that we do that. That's a bad idea. But like, that's
have been plenty of SCA kings that thought has crossed my mind, but yes.
Right. So that's Fraser's whole theory, is like the dying and reborn king. Anyway, so we're mentioning that and then abandoning it as a outdated modality.
Yeah, agreed. Because that's, when we were geeking about this in chat, I'm like, that's a thing. Like, sure.
And it really was. Like in the 50s, there was this whole Golden Bough, man. Read Golden Bough.
No doubt. And yeah, I do the New Year's, sorry, I'm pouring myself some more water here. The New Year's celebration, it does totally make sense, because this is the return, and that's when you do it, and it feels like the beginning of the year. Even, I mean, now with our Gregorian calendar, obviously it is tied into the actual, beginning of the year and how we reset and everything, and next year is going to be better and blah, blah, blah. It makes sense that they did the same thing. Yeah. Because, the sun is coming back. You don't celebrate a new year when you're getting less daylight, right? So certainly not in a hunter-gatherer agricultural setting, right? So, I don't know what is going on with my sinuses today. I don't know if I'm getting a cold or if there is something, I don't know.
Clearly what needs to happen is Brian needs to bring you a hot toddy.
Right? And he's not watching this, though. He is, I think, watching a car show.
I'm just, speaking it into being.
I appreciate your looking out for me there. This is all you hear, the Odin, the tie into the gods. Yeah. Because I was looking, I found some information and references on that, and there is always the talk of, is Yule a celebration of Odin being the biggest god, as it were? I'm like, I don't know. So I'm going to let you go on about that, because I don't see it.
Right. So they're in the Younger Edda, in the Prose Edda, which is written by Snorri Sturluson in the, oh God, is it the 12th or the 13th century? Did he write it in the 12th century? Or did he write it in the 1200s? Yeah, I don't remember either.
13th century. Yeah, he wrote it in 1250. Are you looking it up right now? I'm like, I can look it up.
I'm having this 13th century. That's what Google is telling me.
Yeah, I want to say it was written approximately 1250-ish.
Yeah, I think you're right. I always do that, right? Like, you have that brief moment where you're like, it starts at the 12th.
The time.
Is it 1200? I don't remember.
all the time.
So anyway, so in the Younger Edda, we have this, there's the language of poetry, and within that, there's a poem that lists the names of Odin, and it's called Odin's-Nafen, which means Odin's names, or Odin's-Nafen. And in that poem, in stanza 7, he is referred to as Yolnir, which literally means like the Yuler, the one who does Yule. And then in stanza 18, he's referred to as Yule-Father, Yule-Father. Right. And these two references, so you will see on Facebook at some point this year, a reference, a meme about Odin being Santa Claus.
Is that what people are talking about when they're talking about, I hadn't.
Just let it go, like Santa Claus is a 19th century thing.
Santa Claus is Santa Claus, and Odin is Odin, and never the two shall meet.
Like Santa Claus is this guy from Turkey.
Yeah, it's okay.
Let it be two things, right? So anyway, so Odin is referred to as Yolnir and Yule-Father in this one poem.
Yes.
And that's really...
That's it, though. That's
it, right? But then you look at... So first off, is this a cult name for Odin? Or is this another god who became syncretized with Odin? So we see that a lot with the Greek gods, right? Yeah. You'll have Athena takes on all these surnames. Mm-hmm. And some of those are like Athena Promachos, right? Where she's worshipped as Athena first in battle. And that's a cult name for her. Other times you'll have it where it's a local god or goddess who has become associated sort of essentially through colonialism, right? Associated with this main god or goddess.
Yes.
So it'll be like Athena, Selene. No, I don't think she's ever associated with Selene. Anyway, but you'll see them where it's a local god or goddess who gets elevated as an aspect. And it's hard to, you're right. And it's hard to describe. They're not the same person, but they're not different people. Right. It's a whole moment. So is that what happened, or is it a cult name? Does it indicate that he held a specific role in this holiday? And we look at the sort of aspects of the holiday, right? It's a holiday about prophecy or creation, which, so Odin gets tied in with prophecy quite a lot. There is a reference to the meat of poetry. That's Odin's feast.
Yes.
He's the one who went and got it. And then there's Jackson Crawford in his video about Yule talks about oaths being particularly oathy at Yule.
Yep.
And Odin's not really the god of oaths, but he gets tied up in them, right? He's pretty bad at keeping them.
He's bad at keeping them. Oh yeah. But I think that's because people oath to, like, with Odin as witness, right? Or it's an oath to Odin that something shall be done, whatever. And yes, I found the references also that Yuletide oaths were stronger or more oath-like. Like that was.
If we talk about sort of creating the world, right? Like the sort of the Norse creation story is the sons of Bor, Odin and his two brothers, kill Ymir and create the world from Ymir's bits, right? Like, so it is an act of sacrifice through which they create the world. Like they don't sacrifice, they sacrifice somebody. Right. Like they kill Ymir and create the world from his body.
From his body. Yeah.
So if we talk about those three major sacrifices in a year, and one of them is at midwinter, and that's for abundance. Is this a recreation in some, maybe not an intentional recreation, but is this sort of a reproduction of the sort of cosmogonic act, where in small scale they're recreating the world to come and emulating Odin and sort of not destroying the old world, but creating here to come, right?
Yeah, all right, I'll buy that.
So is that how Odin gets tied into this holiday? And is though there's no explicit statement saying that this is Odin's holiday, is he somehow specifically tied in with this because of the prophecy, because of creation, because of all of this kind of stuff?
And that does absolutely, I can see that. I'll give you, all right, I will give you that tie into Odin and Yule. The Santa Claus thing I have never bought, and it makes me absolutely lose my shit every time I see it. Yeah. So, let's talk traditions. So this is one of my favorite things. I actually am a very big tradition person. There's things that we do now that date back to medieval and pre-medieval times. And modern traditions, like you learned, like I said earlier, you learned from your grandparents, and they learned it from their grandparents. So there's a good handful of traditions associated with Yule. One of my favorites is drinking.
Yes.
So let's talk about Yule ale.
Right. So Yule ale is this whole concept that exists explicitly. Like we talked about that one pre-Christian reference. He drinks Yule. And in Old Norse, it's uti vil Yule-trekka. He will drink at sea. He wants to drink Yule. So the verb that you use to celebrate Yule is to drink,
right?
To toast, right? So obviously alcohol is going to play, or which is what they would be drinking in a celebratory atmosphere, right? Yeah. Is what they would be drinking. Like that's how you celebrate. You get drunk. You consume. So we talk about.
I also found, I wish I'd written it down. I can't remember where it was. I found a reference to Yule, a specific Yule ale, Yule beer that was brewed specifically for Yule. And that gives me, I don't know what's in it, but it gives me the impression that it's different from your everyday summer ale, right? And part of that is going to be different because of the different materials available at the time. But yeah, there seemed to be a Yule beer, a Yule ale specifically for it. And I want to know what that is. That tastes
so
like.
There's in the Old Norse drinking customs, Thesis, which is, I completely recommend everybody read because it's fascinating.
Yeah.
He talks about there's sort of two types of beer. You have Öl, which is your everyday beer, and you have Mungat, which is your special high alcohol, high sugar, good beer. This is the good shit. So my guess is that the Yule ale is going to be that Mungat, that high quality alcohol.
The good shit, barley. Maybe it's more of a barley wine than I don't know.
Well, and if you're far enough north, you can ice distill that shit. So, you can really go to town. Yeah, so you put alcohol outside at night to freeze and
Yeah. I don't know why I have never done that before. Wow, that's
it doesn't work as well in Anchorage. You have to be further north. Like you need it to get real cold.
Well, sure, but I have a giant outside freezer.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, go to town. So Hakon, King Hakon is in Hakon of Saga Gotha is described as moving the Yule celebrations, the Christmas celebrations, and the pagan celebrations. He brings them into concert with each other. And he made a law. So this is from the saga. Hakon made a law to keep the Yule festival at the same time the Christians celebrated Christmas, and that everybody should have a feast with malted beer. Yeah. Otherwise, they had to pay in cattle, and they should keep the time holy while one enjoyed the beer. So the beer is absolutely necessary for the celebration at this point, not only of the pagan Yule, but also Christian
Christmas. Yes.
Right. And he didn't care which one you celebrate. He's like, look, you got to celebrate at the same time. And you've all got to get drunk together, which is kind of hilarious to me that he's like, look, guys, we all
got to get drunk. I don't care if you're Christian or pagan.
Get drunk together at the same time. You got to go spend time with your family. And I respect that for some of you that's difficult, so you all need to be intoxicated. And Crawford calculated roughly, so he looked at in the there's some early laws where they talk about how much beer has to be produced, and it's roughly 4 gallons of beer that need to be consumed over the holiday per person. Right. So think about that's a growler, right? So you need to drink 4 growlers of beer, which entirely doable.
Well, especially if we're talking a 10-day period or a 13, easy peasy.
But if we're talking about a shorter period, which seems to be kind of more what's being described in Hakon's saga,
right.
That's you can put it this way, and I can drink a growler of beer as I'll sit down and drink a growler in a day if it's a lighter beer, right? There's one of my local breweries does this really good one that's only 4% alcohol.
Yeah.
But it's in the summer, it's great. It's just you're drinking electrolytes, man. It's fine.
Exactly. But still 4 gallons. And if we look at even a 3-day period, or let's call it a 4-day period, it's a gallon a day.
Yeah. That could start to wear. And if
Yeah.
you're talking about like Munka, which is going to be a higher alcohol content than 4%, let me tell you what.
Oh
like,
yeah, that
could
stuff
really,
is probably closer to, 8 or 10 or something like that.
yeah, you could,
get you going.
you're having a good time. How much is a growler? Growler's 64 ounces.
Yeah.
That's a gallon, right?
64, that's a half gallon.
Oh, okay. How, seriously? That's only half a gallon?
Yeah, isn't it?
We're all looking on the Google really quick.
I know. Okay. 60.
Oh yeah, it is 128 ounces.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Well, okay. So I drink a half gallon of beer.
Right?
Wow. Okay, that's just gotten a lot more. So thank you, Mysia. A growler is half a gallon.
Thanks, Misha. She's one of my friends from Owertha.
Oh, hello.
She's made of awesome.
From Owertha or from Ontario?
No, what did I say? I said Owertha. Lowhawk. What was I don't know. Sorry. She's from Lowhawk, Australia.
Okay. Well, hello, other side of the planet.
Right.
It's cold up here. We have snow. So anyway, yeah. Anyway, I don't know anything about, half a gallon, 2 liters. So you're drinking 2 growlers a day.
Yep.
I've learned something now. I'm going to drink my tea.
Half a gallon, 2 liters. Yeah. All right. Sorry. Sometimes I get distracted by replying in chat, and we've also said it on whatever.
Okay.
Whatever. Okay. So, we talked about ale.
We've talked a little bit about sacrifice. We talked about
sacrifice.
So we know we're pretty sure that they were sacrificing. Like, we've got 2 saga references. They were both written post-Christianity. Right. We've got 2 references to blot being made at Yule. Sort of, there's this great blot at Lesra, which is said to take place in January, which, could be a Yule celebration. And it's written about by a guy named Theitmar of Merseburg. So he's not in Scandinavia, he's in Germany. Yeah. He writes how the Vikings met every 9 years at Lesra in Zealand in January to offer to their gods 99 people and just as many horses, dogs, hens, and hawks. For these should serve them in the kingdom of the dead and atone for their evil deeds. So this is his writing. Whether or not there was really 99 human sacrifices.
Yeah, that's a lot of people to lose from an already not robust population base.
Right. So we know that they're kind of exaggerating, like Christian writers are exaggerating the evils of the heathens.
Yes.
So this could entirely be that. But they're also, like, we know that there was a major cult site at Lesra. Is the blot itself an exaggeration? There probably was some sort of celebration. 9 is a number that appears quite frequently in Norse mythology.
Yes.
So
yep,
like maybe. That part of it I'll buy. I just don't know that there was 99 dead people hanging from trees.
I don't necessarily buy that, but I could, tie that back into general sacrifices and bloodletting for the new year and all of that. So gift giving. Gift giving is one of my favorite things just in general, but gift giving in Norse time there was so much tied into it. It wasn't just, hey, I thought of you and here's a thing. It was it had to be reciprocal. It was a contest. It was I give you this silver bracelet. Oh, but you gave me a bigger silver bracelet. So now I have to give you a gold bracelet, and then you have to give me a draft horse. And like, it's so much one-upsmanship in gift giving that it's almost not gift giving anymore. It is, but it's.
So among friends, we see them trying to keep things level.
Yes.
Like, you don't want to put your friend in a position where they are now at a deficit.
Right. The competitive gift giving is usually seems to be more king to king, or there's a person coming into my office.
Hey, Brian.
Oh, you made me tea. You made me a hot toddy. That's awesome. It worked, everybody. Thank you. So gifts, right? So yes, family to family, and brother to brother, and that sort of thing seem to be fairly level. And farm farmsteaders would give gifts to their tenant farmers, their employees, whatever you want to call them, and they were reciprocated back, usually with a lower quality gift, because the tenant farmer doesn't have as much to give. But the really competitive stuff I've seen is usually king to king, or like the son of a king to a different king. And that, because some of that I think is my daddy's bigger than your daddy sort of thing.
Right.
Right.
So there's a great example and gift can mean, first I guess let's define what we mean by gift.
Oh yeah.
Gift can be a number of different things. It can be a physical object. It can be like we think of today as a gift. Like I give you this mug, and you give me a piece of cheese, right? Like physical gifts exchanged. Gifting can be a feast. So if I throw you a feast, that is a gift to you. That's extending to you that hospitality, and that's a gift. It can be, especially in Iceland and Greenland, land, right? So, and that's kind of a physical object. But like somebody comes to Iceland. This happens all over the place in the land of Mabok. Somebody comes to Iceland. They live with a farmer for a year, and that farmer then gives them a chunk of their territory.
Yeah.
Right. Fosterage is a type of gift. So you'll either see it where a lower status home hosts a high status child.
Yes.
So, and I don't mean like peasant farmer hosts king's son, right?
No,
it's more like, respectable upper class hosts nobility, or that kind of, where there is a difference in status, but it's not like monstrous. Right. And that elevates the status of the lower class group, and creates kinship bonds that are very important later.
Very important, and continue to be important the whole time, because that's how you build partnerships and marriages. Right. And
right. And then obviously you'll also see fosterage where it's between two people of equal status.
Yeah.
And that's more about distributing children. So children are expensive, right? And they take a lot. There's a lot that goes into raising them. Yep. So if you have a lot of kids and somebody else has very few, right, you can send your child to live with them. And usually you send money, right? But that helps offset the cost of raising them in your home, but also provides that other home with a sort of child, right? Like there's kinship bonds where the fosterage exists. Also labor, because that child would be helping around the farm, not as a servant, but as any family member would.
As a family, you would, right? Absolutely. I did that. I was lucky in that I have one child, but when she became a teenager, I then had a pack of children. We called it the Teen Labor Squad, and they would come to events with me and help, and it was fantastic. And it was basically a fostering thing, and it was lovely.
But you're ensuring community survival by ensuring the most number of children survive. So giving all the children sort of the best opportunity to survive by sort of spreading them out among the homes.
Right.
You could have mortuary gift giving, which is really where the living gift the dead. And so this is a pre-Christian thing, obviously. When you still had grave goods, you gifted the dead with goods, and that was sort of one last refresher of the relationship between the two of you. So if we think back to the Havamal talks about how do you maintain friendships with gifts, and the Hollander translations with gifts and weeds should friendships be maintained, right? And here weeds means clothing. But so this is that refreshing that relationship one last time. You give them one last gift.
Right.
And so that's mortuary gift giving. You have nicknames, are their whole own moment of gifts. And there's a great discussion in Njál's saga, Brennu Njál's saga. So Berthora spoke to the men while they were at table. Gifts have you been given to all, father and sons, and you're not real men unless you repay them. So here we have that reciprocal nature, right? And what gifts are these, said Skarphedin. You, my sons, have all received the same gift. You have been called dung herdlings, and my husband has been called old beardless. So she's being sarcastic, and she's really goading her menfolk on, like we've talked about that cold counsel. And she's like, you guys have all been insulted, but the insult is, in a way, it's a gift.
It's a gift, right?
Positive gift, but it's a gift that needs to be repaid. So she's saying, look, you've all received a gift, and that gift was a nickname. It wasn't a good
shitty
nickname either. And then you have a king's gift, and a king's gift is a gift from a king.
Yes.
And usually it is a method of recognizing and ensuring loyalty. So
Yes.
you have there's a lot of sagas, right? The Icelanders go back to Norway, and they serve the king for a period of time. If we think back to really quickly, yes, Greta, this will be posted later. So if we think back to the Alvin and the polar bear,
Oh
right?
yeah.
He goes and he serves the king, and he receives these gifts in exchange, and he goes back home and distributes them, right?
Yes.
So this physical gift is a way to recognize the service and the loyalty of the person who served the king, and also a physical reminder of that service and loyalty that he can then take home with him
And
and
show.
display.
Yeah.
So there's a couple of examples. Egil's saga, right? Egil's father receives this axe from the king,
Yes.
and who he thinks very poorly of, and he breaks the axe, and then he sticks the broken bits up in his farmhouse, and he's like, we're gonna forget about this. And then later there comes a point where he has to like display the axe,
Right.
and he insults the king by just being like, yeah, I didn't take care of your gift.
Yeah.
Like, whatever.
Now that's a big FU and a big old like, yeah.
Right. So one of the things, so there was this great article. This by the way was this week's reading pile. Like I had a really good time this week. It was a lot of fun.
So glad you did.
But so there was this, is that it? Yeah. So it's somebody's master's thesis. Sesta Katona's master thesis from the University of Iceland, and it's called Unpractical Objects: The Concept of King's Gifts in the Old Norse World. And one of the things they got into was how the king's gift acts in a lot of ways in this sort of proto-fealty.
Right.
So we talk about fealty as, I swear an oath of fealty to you, and in return for my service, you give me, there's an oath of fealty back, but I also get something, right? Like,
yes.
I swear service and I get land.
Yes.
Traditionally.
Yep.
And here there are examples of land, but the king's gift is, I have sworn service to you, my king, and in return I get this prestige object, and that object will carry prestige and will be an indication of the prestigious status that I hold as I go forth in the world.
Right.
And so in return for this oath that I've given you, and in return for the service that I've given you, you don't give me land, but you give me prestige.
Yeah.
And that prestige, and that's it's not the same as a fealty relationship. It's not the same as like what we'll look at. Well, we won't look at it, but what we talk about when we talk about sort of chivalric, that chivalric culture. It's not the same.
It's not right, but it is still, there is a prestige with receiving a gift from the king, and
it tends to be some sort of great weapon or something that will, to other people who weren't witness to the act.
Yes.
Who will see that and be like,
and know, right. They'll
right,
see
like
that, or they'll see that there was a reference. There was one that was a silver torque, and it was like, I can't remember where it was, but it was described as like a big honking silver torque, the kind of thing that a normal warrior or a normal farmer would not have. But everybody knew that because it was so impressive, he had to have received it from the king, and therefore this kind of lowly person has a higher status now because he got this amazing thing from the king that you can recognize from a mile away, sort of thing. God, I wish I could remember. I should actually write some of this stuff down sometimes.
So those great objects, right? There's another one that's described as an axe inlaid with gold.
Oh yeah,
right? Like this kind of thing, right? You would see it. We think about, now I've just totally forgotten the name of the axe. There's that beautiful, there's an extant Viking age axe
with all the inlay.
Yeah, with the silver inlay, and it's the most beautiful thing. So you imagine something of that caliber, right?
Yeah.
That even today, we're sitting here, okay, two avowed early medieval history nerds. Like, obviously we know about it, but whatever. But like, that object has taken on a personality in some ways,
yes.
right? And that's one of the things this article talks about, is that these objects, by virtue of how they were given and why they were given, and by their very splendor, achieve this sort of special magic, and they can convey. So we talk about it as prestige, but in the Norse sources, it's luck, that they convey the magic of this item because how it was given, because of the power of the gift, because it was given in return for something great, which is your service, because it itself is splendid, that it conveys the sort of magical special luck. And so that's the power of the king's gift, and that's why the king's gift is important. But before we kind of talk about other gifty things, I do also want to talk really briefly about feasts, because I kind of blew right past that. We have two kinds of feasts that we see in the Norse sagas. We have feasts between friends, and so Njál's saga talks about this. So fervent was their friendship that they invited each other to a feast every autumn and exchanged generous gifts. This went on for a long time. Yes. So here you've got two friends. That's that same level relationship, right? So I invite you guys come, you feast with me, and then the next year you invite me and I come feast with you. And you want to maintain that level playing field, but you're not seeking to embarrass your friend. You're not doing anything like that. You're just, you're maintaining that friendship with this constant back and forward of gifting. Right. So then you have the other type of feast you have is you have patron role for feasts. Mm-hmm. And that's where a higher status individual, so if we're talking about Iceland, you have the Gothi, right? So the Gothi invites all of his thingmen to come and stay with, or I think that's the right term. Anyway, he invites all the farmers who have sworn to support him to come and feast. And in this feast, he is acting as patron, and he gives gifts to his followers, and in return, his followers give them their support. So he needs their support to maintain his position, and also to maintain his position, he needs to be seen to be generous. Yes. Because without that generosity, how can he expect anybody to support him? Right. Exactly. So he's giving this wealth away, and that's what, like, there's a great example in Njál's saga where Berthora says, this is what wealth is for. This is the point of wealth, is to distribute it to others, to share it, like display magnanimity, right? Mm-hmm. To be the most generous. What otherwise, why have it? What's the point? And so that's the patron role feast. And then at the end of the feast, I love this. Yeah, the sending the guests away with gifts. Like, we've had a great feasting day, couple of days maybe, because he would have stayed over, and here's your parting gift, right? Yeah. Washer and dryer. But that's a pretty standard ending in the sagas. And then the gifts, they sent away the guests with gifts. Right. So we're pretty much on time, but I wanted to go, let's jump to the end here to the tables. It ties in with feasting. I found a great reference in Eyrbyggja saga, which was written after conversion, about a time before conversion. And there was something really great in there, that it was specifically 14 years before Christianity came to Iceland. And I love that it's, so 15 winters, right? Or 14 winters. That while there was feasting during Yule, there was not the fasting that happened in Christian times. So there's all this feasting. I'm guessing it's probably a shorter feasting period, because that's, you're not doing it all the time. But I love I found this as well, the leaving the food out on the table for the ghosts, the past family members. And that goes back to the veil between worlds being thinner because of time or whatever it is, right? So leaving it out for dead family members, there's a bunch of different explanations for this. And this is coming again from that Yule, pre-Christian Yule article. So it's left out for ghosts, for dead family members, for angels, for trolls, for the wild hunt, other supernatural visitors, for no reason at all. You just leave it out overnight because you're supposed to, or for future abundance. So, and these are coming more from folkloric sources. So this is stuff that's recorded in the 18th, 19th, 20th century as historical practices, which entirely possible. They could be historical practices, right? Like, I mean, but also there's a lot to be said for tradition. I mean, so many families leave out milk and cookies for Santa. Like, is that the same sort of thing? Is
Is it a gift offering to a god? Is it, I got too drunk last night because I drank a gallon of ale and didn't put away the bread and butter? Like, I don't, and that becomes a tradition.
Right. Well, so tonight I will leave a shoe with an apple and a carrot in it.
Yes.
And that's for Santa Claus's horse, just in case, just in case Santa Claus remembers that I exist, that I will leave out this apple and carrot, and in the morning, magically candy, if I didn't go shopping for candy, so there won't be, but
I'm like, consider.
but it's what you did. It's like what I grew up doing. It's what you do.
Right.
It's how you, and so, it's a Dutch thing. You leave out candy or you leave out stuff for his horse. So the tables, there's some early continental sources that reference female supernatural figures. And one of those is Bucardus of Worms. So he talks about actually two different tables. The one referencing the female supernatural figures, he says, and this is being written late 10th, early 11th century, southern Germany. So Worms is in the south of Germany. He died about 1025. So we know he definitely didn't write it any later than that. Have you done what some women are wont to do at certain times of the year, that you prepared a table in your house and placed food and drink and 3 knives on the table, so that when the 3 sisters arrived, whom posterity and folly of antiquity called the Parcae, which is a Roman triumvirate of goddesses dealing with fortune and sort of the future, so that there they might be refreshed. And did you hold up your own authority and your own name in the place of divine piety? And did you surrender to the devil? So I say that you believed that these women who you say are sisters may benefit from you either here or in the future. So here he's talking about, what he's saying is, like, basically to the people of his area, like, are you participating in these bad acts that you need to atone for?
Right.
And the bad act here is, did you sort of participate in this pagan belief that if you leave food out for the 3 sisters of fortune, who could easily be associated, though he doesn't explicitly associate with the Norns, right? Like the 3 sisters of fate.
Absolutely.
Right. Like,
and that's it's interesting to me that it's a Roman triumvirate that he references, because
so he's writing this in Latin.
Yeah.
And so there's a habit, especially in early medieval writers, where if you're writing in Latin, you associate everybody with Latin.
That's true.
Right. So that's kind of what I think is happening here. And there's a term for that, and I've completely blanked on it. So the other table he references, have you observed that the January day with the rite of pagans, so that you, for example, did more on the occasion of the new year than you used to do before or after? So I say that you prepared your table with precious stones or dishes of food in your house at that time, or you conducted singers and choirs through the streets and alleys, or you sat on the roof of your house in a circle traced around you with your sword, so that you could see and perceive what would happen to you in the coming year. So here he's talking about a table. So the table references this table with precious stones and dishes of food. But then you've got a little bit going back to that prophecy thing.
Yeah.
Where you apparently sit on the roof of your house. So in
a circle drawn by your sword. That's feeling awfully pagan to me.
And it's incredibly specific, which is interesting to me. Is
so specific.
You're drawing a circle with your sword, and in that you can see the future. So these are not references to Norse activities, but they are references to Germanic activities. And we've got some, that, like, everybody had their own flavors, but there's some pretty solid cultural stuff going on. So anyway, those are the 2 table references from Bucardus of Worms. I thought they were a lot of fun. And before we wrap up, so how do we celebrate Yule if we want to celebrate a pre-Christian Viking Age Yule? You're going to want to do it about January 12th of next year. So, do your Christmas stuff and then do your Yule stuff. Have a good time. Or you can do it all at once. Follow Harald. Harold? Now I've just blocked.
Yeah, who combined them? It was Harold.
Right. No, it's Håkon.
Oh, yes, whatever. If it's not an H name, it's a Thor name. I don't know.
Håkon.
Nice.
Anyway, so celebrate it. Get drunk.
Give gifts.
Give gifts. Consume food. You want to consume it in in excess, right? You want to
Yes.
you want to go kind of nuts. So lots of food, lots of drink, give lots of gifts, because in doing this, you're creating a 2021 that will.
It's going to be a hell of a lot better than 2020.
God, it's such a low bar.
Fair point.
Like, that will possess so much of this, right? Like, so just there's our tips for you. The Saga Saturday top tips.
I think to make 2021 better than 2020, we could probably just sit on the deck with a PBR and call it good, because it's got to be better.
Oh my goodness, yes, you're not wrong. So anyway, that's what I've got for you. And
awesome. And you, again, as usual, knocked it out of the park. Like I said at the beginning, I started, or maybe it was when we were chatting before we went live, I was starting my notes. I had kind of like a rough outline. I had my notes, and I went up and created. So for everybody watching, we do all of this on Google Drive, and I started throwing my notes up on Google Drive, and like, I'm not even kidding, I put mine up at 7:37 last night, and you started yours at 7:36. Like,
oh no, I started these on Tuesday.
Well, yeah. I mean, when you actually put it onto the drive, or maybe that was when you updated it, and I'm like, oh, I'm gonna go pop over and we can combine our notes. And I looked and I'm like, well, you're already at 4 pages and I'm at like a half a page. So all right, we're just going with Ginnehild's notes. So thank you for having all of the knowledge. Next week, we'll be back on, what is that? That'll be the 12th. We're going to talk about the conversion. And part of that is, I think, part of what we're going to, this will unfold over this week as we finish our research. But part of it is going to be descriptions of conversion and how pagans, the old gods and the new gods, how people recognize both at the same time. It's not necessarily tied to Yule specifically, because there are references at like summer all things of the merger, as it will. But I'm sure we'll find some tasty bits about Yule during the conversion. And then our final one in, what would that be? The 12th, the 17th? No, I can't do math. Whatever.
19th.
19th. Will be Yule post-conversion. And we're all Christian all the time. And I'm sure you have a pile of documentation for that.
I have found one already, so something to look forward to. The coming of the Christmas visitors, folk legends concerning the attacks on Icelandic farmhouses made by spirits at Christmas. So yes. It's going to get briefly spooky, and I'm looking forward to that. So,
oh yeah, there are definitely, because that's because the veil is thinner. I'm going to go with the veil is thinner.
It's dark and it's cold.
It's dark and it's cold. Oh, well, I'm going to go back to Eyrbyggja's saga for a minute, and that's where the seal beating happened in the middle of winter. So, yeah. Right? I'm just going to go beat that Silky. All right. I think we are done for today. Do you have any last bits?
No, thank you so much. Thank you to everybody who tuned in. I hope you all enjoyed yourselves. I certainly did. And Ula, you're wonderful. And I'm glad that we do this together.
I'll be honest, I'm gonna like fangirl on you for a minute. This is one of the highlights of my week. Just to be able to hang out and geek with you and be a total nerd and nobody looks at me weird. I mean, well, maybe they do, but I don't care.
It's the best.
It's the best. I love it. All right. Bye, everybody. Have a great weekend, and we will see you next week.